All right, well, good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for taking time to join us at Global Genes Live, a rare patient advocacy unsummit. We're so excited for our upcoming session, The Power of Human Connections and Resilient Communities. My name is Stephanie Brown, and I'm the head of the Rare Disease franchise in North America for Ipsen, and I'm going to be your moderator today. Before we get everything kicked off, a little bit of a review of a few housekeeping notes. First, all attendees are currently muted, so that's going to reduce any interruptions, but we do encourage you to use the chat function in your On24 window for any questions, and we'll present them back to the speakers and hopefully get a chance to answer all of those. So to open the chat, please click on the blue chat button located on the meeting controls at the bottom of your screen. And if we don't have time for all of your questions, we'll certainly try to get back to you after the program. Also, post your top takeaways and fun moments during Global Genes Live on social media, and you can tag @GlobalGenes for a chance to be featured on our social media channels. The official event hashtag as well is hashtag 2020 GG Summit. And finally, we encourage you all to participate as active listeners. Take advantage of this opportunity to hear from these leaders and experts here and ask questions of them. It's really a program for you and your time to learn and to find answers on critical challenges that might be affecting you. So now, I'm very pleased to welcome our discussion leaders for today's session. First, Roberta Smith, President of the Allergial Syndrome Foundation. Welcome, Roberta. Lisa Moss, Senior Director of Donor Relations at the TS Alliance. And finally, Maria Luisa Mendiola, Founder and CEO of a very innovative company that you're going to hear about, Swimwear. They're each going to share a more complete background as we dive into this conversation. I'm going to ask Roberta to kick us off. And Roberta, please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey, and what does community mean to you, and how have you defined it for your disorder?
Hi, thank you so much, Stephanie. Again, my name is Roberta Smith. I'm the president of the Allergial Syndrome Alliance. It's a patient advocacy organization for those suffering and dealing with Allergial syndrome. I'm also a mother of twin daughters. They will be 17 in November. One has Allergial syndrome and one doesn't. And I also have a day job. I'm a nuclear medicine technologist with Ascension Health here. So I wear several different hats. So community means a lot of different things for me as a parent, as a nonprofit leader, and also as someone who deals with patients on a day-to-day basis in my career, my medical career. So first of all, I'd like to say, community to me is camaraderie and friendships, especially in a time where it's like COVID right now, for example, families seem to be more isolated and opportunities to see one another in person are a lot less as far as, available. And then also, friendships in the rare disease as a parent, it's really having the opportunity to relate to someone that understands what you're going through in the good and the bad of the rare disease up and down life that we live. So community is really what brought me to the Allergial Syndrome Alliance, and it's really what keeps me going as the president, as well as in my day job relating to the patients that we have.
Well, thanks, Roberta. Lisa, how about you? Please tell us who you are and what does community mean to you?
Hi, I'm Lisa Moss, and I'm the Senior Director of Donor Relations at the TS Alliance. And the TS Alliance, we support individuals who have tuberous sclerosis complex, or TSC for short. It's a rare genetic disease that causes tumors to grow in vital organs, and it's the leading known genetic cause for both epilepsy and autism. And my son has TSC. He's 16 years old, and I think that for me, community has been essential for understanding TSC, connecting with other people who have similar experiences. And I feel really honored to also work at the TS Alliance now, where I've been for the last 8 years, and to be able to connect and make a difference every day in a community that is so important to my family and so important to so many others.
Great, thank you. And Maria?
Hi, everyone. So my name is Maria Luisa Mendiola, and I'm the founder of Swimwear. I have Jones syndrome, or also known as asphyxiating thoracic syndrome. It affects 1 in 100,000 babies every year, so incredibly rare. So for me, the biggest challenge with the term community was how to go about and finding it. And I couldn't quite relate to some of the Facebook groups that I found, so I decided to create my own, and that's actually how Miga Swimwear came to be. We consider ourselves a place where people can come and learn about different health diagnoses, and most importantly, understand what the quality of life or the life experience is like for people living with different diagnoses, mine included, but we've also had the opportunity to work with people who have different types of disabilities, chronic illnesses, and other visible differences like burn survivors.
Great. Well, thank you, and welcome to all of you. Lisa, maybe I'll start with you for the next question. How has finding your rare community impacted you and maybe changed your journey? Did you struggle to find a footing in the community? How did you find a place that's applicable for you?
Yeah, I really did struggle at the beginning to find a community that was the right fit for us. Evan was originally diagnosed with epilepsy, and they didn't recognize that he had tuberous sclerosis complex at first. And so we followed this epilepsy path, and he was having so many seizures at early on that when I connected with the epilepsy community, I think we kind of freaked them out a little bit because he was having, 10 to 15 seizures a day. And, a lot of the times people in the epilepsy community don't have that many in a year if things are going well, especially. And so we were sort of an anomaly when we entered the epilepsy world. And then he was about 2 years old when he was diagnosed with TSC. And at first I felt like he was doing so well in comparison to a lot of the people I was meeting with TSC that I didn't necessarily feel like our family was on the same path as other families. And I think one of the things that's happened is there's been so much progress in treatments for TSC that the people are we're hoping that we're starting to narrow down the intensity of the disease. There are still people who are really significantly impacted, but that there are more people doing well. The younger kids are doing better than generations past. We always say that generations kind of stand on the backs of the prior as we move forward and find better treatments, better options. But it did take me a while to feel like I really fit in either community. But now I do. Now I feel very, very much, centered in this community, and I can't imagine not having that resource available to my family.
Oh, that's wonderful. And Roberta or Maria, what about your journey? Challenges did you face?
Well, in my case, because my gen condition is so mild, I think, for the most visible thing that you can see for me is that I have short fourth toes. Usually gen affects like the bone growth. And so many of the diagnoses that commonly affect people that have gen syndrome didn't affect me. And so for me, it felt almost sometimes claiming my identity with a rare condition as a little bit of an imposter syndrome because it was so mild. And so how could I approach different organizations or find support because my condition was so mild? And so for me, the reason why the community was so important was because I still felt incredibly vulnerable sharing my diagnosis. It took me until I was probably like 26 years old and someone asked me, why do your feet look so weird? That I was like, how is it possible that I'm 26 years old and this still bothers me? And so it wasn't until that point where I started thinking, okay, this is something that I need to figure out a way to start owning my story. For me, it happened that I started working with people that have different types of conditions, burn survivors, women with cleft palate, with facial palsy, and realized that the experience is very similar in a lot of ways. We all get uncomfortable questions. We all get social anxiety when people ask, why we look a certain way. We also feel isolated. We feel like we're the only person out there that looks a certain way. And so because of that, that's when I realized like it really doesn't matter what condition you have. It's more about finding a community where you can relate, even if it's in the top level of how you're feeling. And that truly, I always say that what I do for a living is incredibly selfish because I'm getting to heal and I'm getting better in my self-love and self-acceptance journey by getting to work with women that have totally different health conditions from my own.
Yeah. And Roberta, any advice, continuing on that conversation, that you would give to individuals trying to find their community now?
Yes. One of the main things is to really identify what it is you need. You have to be honest with yourself and be open enough and vulnerable enough to really identify what is it that you need. So as a parent with Allergial syndrome, things are very complex. Several organ systems are affected. There's a real heaviness. So I really had to be vulnerable, which is what brought me to a place where I was looking for support. I didn't need it from my parents. I needed a different kind of support. And I started reaching out to my doctors. I started, local organizations. I went on my own journey to find resources of what I needed, primarily as a parent, to feel supported and keep my own mental health in check because things were so heavy, in the early years with my daughter. So it's really being honest with yourself, asking yourself the hard questions. What is it that you need? Is it help for you? Is it help for your child? Is it financial help because, your finances are strained? Is it relationship, support because the pressure is crumbling your relationship? What is it? And once you identify that, it gets easier to look, for the support that you need, because the hardest part is breaking through your own walls and your own, lack of self-confidence to move through that hard difficult time.
Yeah, and actually we received a question from Jennifer, and it fits into this discussion really nicely. I think, Roberta, just continuing on, what's the best route then? So once you identify what your needs are, to find a good community support, is it social media? Is it Yahoo? What have you found to work?
You know, social media right now is it's really amazing. It's amazing because things are at the touch of your fingertips. So, you know, we have, at least in our organization, we have several different support groups, but unfortunately, they're primarily tied to Facebook. And so I think it's important to understand, you know, where the community lies, and whether it's searching out an organization that has your disease, Google the disease, talk to the experts, your doctor, find out where people are getting information. The second piece is, if your, you know, syndrome or disease or chronic illness has certain aspects to it that you feel are heavier in your life than others, what does that mean to you? You know, for us, we have a liver disease that is really a primary focus of the disease. So it would be trying to locate friendships or people that relate to maybe the heaviest aspect of your life that you're going through, so you have a direct connection to someone you can relate to, or a group. I really think it's a journey of searching, and you just don't stop until you find it. And if you can't find it, you create it, and that's, you know, and the people will come.
Yeah, that's great advice. So maybe switching gears a little bit, and I'll ask Maria and Lisa. I've heard you both speak passionately about the role of language and how we talk about patients and rare diseases in building those stronger and more inclusive communities. How can language be a welcome mat or a barrier to finding your community? Can you just share your thoughts on that? Maybe Maria, you start, and then Lisa.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think language is, I think, the first step that you need to take. What exactly are you ready to accept of your identity? So do you see yourself as someone that has this rare condition? Do you see yourself as someone that has diagnoses that are part of this rare condition, like Roberta just mentioned, like liver disease? And once you accept that, it's almost like a domino effect. All of these doors start opening up, and it all comes down to accepting who you are, but then the help component. And I think this is a lot from what we're hearing from Lisa and Roberta as well. Like, you need to be comfortable in a point with your diagnosis that you're there to ask for help. I personally, as I mentioned, didn't find a lot of support on Facebook groups. That's particular because I was looking for people who had short fourth toes, feet that looked like mine. And unfortunately, a lot of the conversation on these Facebook groups is about getting surgery. With my personal decision that I do not want to get surgery. And so I'm looking for more something else. No, let's accept our feet, how they look. And I love, for example, in these groups, when people post like pictures of themselves on the beach, proudly showing their feet in flip. That to me has been helpful. But there's some times where I don't want to go into this Facebook group because it's not helpful for me. And I also mentioned a little bit about like the imposter syndrome, right? So like, I have Jen, it's very mild, so where do I fit in that conversation? It's almost, that's where I went and started using the word disfigurement. I mean, that's the word that most closely describes what I have in my feet. It's a disfigurement, and a lot of people feel uncomfortable with that word. And I think it's understanding too that the language that you use to explain your condition, you choose it, right? No one else is gonna give you that, you choose it. And so once you choose whatever it is, you're able to find these pockets of people that also relate to that. And we also mentioned too, like the importance of these umbrella organizations like Global Genes, where you have a lot of rare conditions, right? And so if you're not feeling comfortable in like associating yourself with your diagnosis just yet, this is a great resource that you can tap into.
Yeah, and Lisa, what are your thoughts on the topic of language?
Yeah, I really love what Maria says about owning the condition and becoming empowered by that. And I think that in our family, we don't use words like normal or fair because there's just really no no place in our lives for those words. And so we look at redefining normal, and we use that phrase a lot because what's normal in our house is normal for us, but it may not be the same thing that would be normal for my son's friends. And I think it's really important to recognize when you're talking about your condition, we're not defined by these conditions. They are part of who we are, but they're not all of who we are. And I think it's really important to just feel comfortable in our own skin, and anything that we can do to help that is a huge benefit. And I think language can be a very powerful force to do that. If you have a negative concept and you decide to a negative word and you decide to own that word, there's a lot of power and strength in that. And I think that's something that we've tried to do.
Great, thank you. So now tackling the topic of COVID and our current virtual world, or world where we've been shut down a lot over the last number of months. We're getting a lot of questions in the chat function about this. So let's tackle this topic. So how has COVID changed how you're building community, engaging your community, supporting them? And I think it's important to hear from everyone here. Roberta, do you want to start us off? What has changed? What's happening in COVID, and how are we able to support patient communities?
Sure. This new landscape is, it's tough because families, they really desire the person-to-person communication. And especially when we're dealing with rare disease, those opportunities to get together are already so rare. So limiting them or putting a stop on it, it just can seem, overwhelming and tough. What we've been able to do is really offer things to the community that are tangible opportunities that they didn't have in the past. So, for example, we've offered live Zoom opportunities with, clinical experts of the disease, scientists. Just this last week, we had a virtual research roundtable that had pharma and families and clinicians and researchers all in one day event. And what we make sure to do is open that up so families can actually interact and talk to these experts and people in the field. And that is a tremendous, it doesn't take the place of in person, but it's a tremendous opportunity that organizations really need to consider. Along with that, we offer Zoom Hangouts where families, we'll do a morning coffee and families can just get on and it's laid back and they ask questions and we just talk about how our days are going. And we try to make sure that we do those at different times so that our international community can also get involved because they're outside of, the country they're at. That isolation can be even more if they're relating or connecting to us. So we have to be sure to include that. So those are just a few of the ways that we've been able to really keep the community engaged, because we don't want the community to check out, of connecting because the options are limited.
Yeah, and that's the sentiment that's coming through the chat. It's, how do we make those more robust virtual connections? Because obviously it's ideal to be face-to-face. But Lisa, what are your thoughts around what we've been going through in the COVID situation and building your community?
So it was really crazy when we first started having challenges and closings with COVID, and it's amazing that we've been dealing with this for 6 months already. We really looked at everything that we were doing as an organization and just had to pivot and figure out what we needed to do different. How do we do what we do, but do it differently? And we sort of just threw everything away and started rebuilding from scratch almost. And we looked at what our community needed right away, which was advice and knowledge and information. And so we have a lot of people who are on immunosuppressant medications. People were worried about getting medications from a regular pharmacy or a specialty pharmacy, and what that access issue might be as a result of COVID, because we just didn't know what was happening. And people needed to connect, and they needed to figure out what to do with their kids and how to manage school and all of those things. And what we did was we built a whole campaign or a collection of outreach aspects. And so we did town halls, we did webinars, we had open forums. We just did everything we could think to pull people together and provide outlets for talking to each other, as well as getting information, connecting directly with experts. And in the field, it was really incredible to see how many of our experts were excited to participate in these things and connect with our communities. And then we started looking at the other things that we do that are outreach. We do 32 walks across the country, and we weren't able to do any of those in person. And when we do these events, it's really not just an awareness walk or a fundraiser. It's really an opportunity for our community to come together and connect with one another. And so that was, I think, a really big challenge to figure out, how do we do that? And so we did one weekend, and we wrapped all kinds of activities around it, where we had a big kickoff Zoom event and a wrap up, and we had live events that we did on Facebook and YouTube. And then we encouraged people to really engage and promote things on social media and connect in that way. So we had a lot of different threads of ways that people could connect with one another. And now we're doing what would have been regional conferences, where we would have, in 3 different cities, a local information conference in person. And we had to figure out how to do those in a virtual setting. And so instead of doing the same thing we would have done, we made those so that each one has a different set of topics. Some are the same, but instead of doing very similar conferences in 3 locations, we did 3 separate, we're doing 3 separate events and conferences for families, so that because you can attend all 3 now that it's virtual. And that's kind of the upside, is that some things that you might not have been able to do because of regional challenges, now with Zoom, you can participate. It's a different participation, which is challenging, and we're definitely still trying to figure these things out as we go and make the best of the situation. But those are some of the things that we did as a result of COVID-19.
That's wonderful. What about you, Maria? How has COVID impacted your world?
Yeah, what we saw at the beginning of the pandemic was people just wanted connection. So we instead of doing our blog series that we usually do, we actually switched it up to doing an Instagram live. And we started having different people just join us and talk about how they were coping with COVID. And keep in mind, a lot of people in our community have chronic illnesses, and a lot of these people, or people have disabilities, a lot of people are uniquely prepared for extended periods of isolation, for extended periods of being at home. So in this position, we try to make people that were part of our community that are able-bodied understand that it was a great time for them to hear from people who have chronic illnesses, who have disabilities, who have these skill sets to cope with these long periods of isolation, of being at home, or of not being able to go to work. And so because of that, we saw a great, just not only audience, but just reception from our community. And we keep doing them till this month. I mean, this month we had a couple of IGTVs about Alopecia Awareness Month, because it was September's not only Alopecia Awareness Month, but Spinal Injury Awareness Month. And just to see people, chiming in who may or may not have these conditions, and really try to understand what that experience is like. My hope is that because of COVID-19, health in everyone's minds is very top priority. And so my hope is that after COVID-19, this will be like a world where, you know, people will be much more empathetic and understanding of people who have pre-existing conditions or rare conditions.
Yeah, so all wonderful ideas. And we have a few questions coming in around the theme of social media. And we're using all of these virtual tools now. I'm not sure who wants to answer this one, but how do we handle misunderstandings? So social media is such an important part of how we're communicating now. What do we do when there are misunderstandings there? And then there's a part B around research and the misinformation, I guess. So it's misunderstandings and then misinformation from a research point of view. How do we make sure that the accurate information, I guess, is being delivered? Who would like to start us off with that? Lisa, you're nodding your head.
Yeah, I am. Sorry. We have a really robust social media network, and you know, the TS Alliance has our pages, but then there are also private groups that are set up by the community. There's TSC Mommies, that's all moms. There's one that's for dads. There's other groups, and those are private and not run by the TS Alliance. But one of the things that I think we're fortunate about is that we have a very engaged community who want to make sure that we're helping each other and providing the right information. And so one of the things that we found is that when things are posted on social media that might not be quite accurate, we tend to sit back and watch and see if somebody from our organization needs to step in and make a correction, or if the community will correct itself. And most of the time, the community corrects itself, and somebody will come in and say, oh, actually, you've got that a little wrong. And they'll include a link to the correct information from our website, or share, you know, some more personal information. Sometimes it's an opinion, but I think it's pretty incredible to see that our community really wants to make sure that the right information is out there. And so they have a vested interest in doing that. And then there are times where we'll step in and say, oh, here's an article about that. This might have some helpful information. And, you know, as an organization, we have to be really careful not to give medical information, but there's a lot of information that's already been written by the experts that we can point to provide that. And so that's one of the ways that we've dealt with that.
Okay. Maria, any thoughts on misinformation? How do you handle it?
Yeah,
I'd like to add into that too.
You want to go first?
Yes, you know, I love how you said you sit back and the community corrects itself. You know, it really does happen that way in our community, but we have many people in the community, and so there's an opportunity for it to correct itself. But when there's a situation when there aren't many people, that can be problematic sometimes, and so we really just sit back and wait to see what happens, you know, and then that we use that as a tool to understand where there's a knowledge gap, and when we do that, it really allows us as leadership to understand, okay, we need to connect with our experts and get these answers and then post those, whether it's a quote from our physician, a quote from a scientist. But we also have an opportunity there then to create a question and answer document based on those questions. When our community was asking about COVID, and there was a lot of swirling about whether our children should stay home from school, with cholestatic liver disease, and, some were on, transplant lists, and what is the overall general idea here. We brought our top Allergial expert and did a live Zoom, and he just gave a spiel for 10 or 15 minutes, and the families just barraged with questions, and they just kept doing it until they felt that they could make a decision. They were empowered with the information to then turn around and make a decision for their life and their circumstance. And it's really bringing the opportunities for people to get the right information. That's so important. Along with that, we connect with the CDC and World Health Organization, so that when there are press releases on next steps or and I'm just primarily using COVID now as an example, on recommendations for going back to school, we took it right from the horse's mouth and posted it to our community so that would ensure it's not just rumor. And then our families, then of course, everybody's life is different. They're putting in their thoughts and their feedback about that and helping each other make a decision. So it's important to empower.
Thank you. And Maria, do you want to wrap us up with that one?
Yeah, I want to talk specifically about misunderstandings, especially when you're on social media. That a lot of quickly messaging on your phone. I think there's a lot to be said too about making sure that people understand kind of what your intention is. So I took that question that came in as, you post something and someone gets an offense to it or just doesn't understand your intention. I think the best way to cope with that is, if it's in an open forum, just direct message that person and explain hey, that's not what I was trying to say. Explain your intention. If the person wants to keep arguing, I would say you know what, you try to explain yourself the best you could, just disengage. I think it's important, if you're gonna look for support on Facebook and social media, that you yourself are very self-aware and know kind of your boundaries. Sometimes people look at, the people that you can even have your same diagnosis can be in totally different journeys than the one you are in, right? So while maybe you already accept certain terminology, the person right next to you might not, and that's totally fine. Understanding that everyone comes from a different point and that everyone's in a different stage is very important. In terms of misinformation, we, Miga Swimwear, we're not a medical or a, research heavy company, but what we do is we do show realistic, experiences of what the quality of life of having certain conditions is like from the people themselves. I was so surprised to see, again, so many people looking into or watching our IGTV about alopecia universalis. I mean, that's an autoimmune disease that affects a certain percentage of people. It doesn't affect a lot of people. And yet people wanted to understand what the experience of losing all of your hair looks like, right? And that experience itself could also apply to people that are going through cancer treatment. And so that's kind of where we come in with our information, is more about the quality of life of people and understanding that each person has had to take their health diagnosis into their own hands and understands it, because at the end of the day, everyone's health diagnosis is so different. So that's kind of the information that we provide, is each person's quality of life from their point of view.
Yeah, thank you. And it sounds like from all of you that there's a mix of the conversation, but some formal education that's helpful as well. A question came in about that. Is there a balance that you see? Is it more conversation that's required now in these times, or formal education? What are you seeing in your communities?
I'd like to say it's important. I'm coming from a nonprofit leadership position here now, in how I'm going to answer. As a nonprofit leader, it's extremely important to understand the pulse of your community right now. I am all for surveys. We've done what's called a Measuring What Matters survey probably 2 months ago. And what we did is did an entire spectrum of mental health, financial, rare disease burden, job loss, physical ailments, anything. We went across the board, asked our families, what are you dealing with? What matters right now? How can we help you? And I'll tell you, the results were staggering. It really helped us understand as an organization exactly what we needed to do. We then ended up beefing up our financial assistance because we've had extraordinary job loss for our parents and our community. We've now based off of that survey, created this virtual roundtable, which was unbelievable. It's what our families asked for and needed. We were able to start our live Zooms, do our Zoom Hangouts. This survey led everything that we're doing right now for our families because, things change, and it's finding the pulse, what really matters right now. It also allowed us to go into our support groups and start, particularly in our Facebook group, we can add a topic to a discussion. So if someone has a question, we can go in and we can tag that question with a topic. So if it's itching related or medication related, we tag it so that we can then in turn go in and look at all the questions that are coming under that topic. It then allows us to provide tools, guidelines, infographics, content on our social media that helps steer what our families are needing and the information they want to take in. And that's extremely powerful. Understanding the pulse could easily start as, with just something as simple as a survey.
Yeah, great. That's a great idea. Just transition a little bit to a topic around resilience. The rare disease community obviously is highly resilient. What are your thoughts, all of you, each of you? What makes your rare disease community resilient or maybe even uniquely resilient? And how does that human interaction come into play to have that resilience? I don't know who wants to start off first. Lisa, do you want to take a stab at that? And then we'll have Roberta and Maria.
Sure. I think in our community, because so many different organ systems are impacted, and some of the major impacts come at different life stages. Our families, I think, go through sort of an evolution. Like early on, it might be seizure activity that they're challenged with, and so they put all of their energy into trying to figure out how to get the seizures to stop, what they need to do to get it under control, whether it's medication or even going on to surgery. And I think our families are very good at keeping the focus of their child in terms of what they need to do first. And it's amazing. I see it across the board that they really focus on what they need to focus on next and what's going to be the best next steps. And then moving into school age where, they really need to make sure that their kids are getting what they need through IEPs. And later there might be challenges with kidney, and they're looking at that, and with behaviors and depression and anxiety. And I think our families, it's an incredible weight, but they're always moving through these different things that they have to, to do the best for their child. And then when people are adults with TSC, they continue on that same path of focusing on what they need to do, how they need to approach it, and being empowered by what they can do to move forward. I'm always amazed at how hopeful our community is. I think we have great benefits that we've had progress in research. So when there are good solutions, there is greater hope. And I think that's something that's always been at the center of our community, to look forward and try to really make sure that we're doing the best, because we can't hang in what's going wrong for too long, because there's nothing productive that comes from that. And there's so much going on with this disease that you don't have time to hang in something that's not productive. So we have to move forward, and we have to be resilient. And it's always very impressive to me to see that in all these different families.
Yes. And Roberta, what are your thoughts on resilience?
Like Lisa's community, our community is dealing with all these different aspects of disease. It's not straightforward. And I think that happens even in the emotional state of the families dealing with that, and, identifying some of those stressors that make things worse for the families, especially right now, is crucial. I think getting a helping hand or offering a helping hand helps create the ability to be resilient and independent at the same time. Families are resilient, there's no doubt about it, but I feel strongly that we can't idly stand by while our families, if we have the ability to change something about it, while our families are really struggling. And so again, we beefed up our financial assistance program. We applied for grants to give assistance. A Global Genes grant, for example, that gave us $10,000 for continuity of care through this difficult time. We're leading our families, if we open up the conversation, the families will tell you what they need. And we want to empower them to get the help that they need. We also are helping our families find mental health providers in their area if they need counseling or if things are too heavy. It's just a matter of looking up and talking through that with them to really give them a leg up. And absolutely, they're resilient, but I think that we can help a lot with that. And even just being a listening ear, I think that's extremely important. I don't know. I just feel strongly as a leader of a nonprofit, we just have to help where we can and not just let them do it alone, Yeah,
that's wonderful. And Maria, what about your thoughts on resilience and that social interaction?
Yeah, I think, the rare condition community is incredibly resilient. The disability community, the chronic illness, it's people who've had to go on these journeys, not only the self-love and self-acceptance journey, but like a health journey where you most of the time end up being your best advocate, right? And so that, you would not be able to cope with that if you weren't inherently resilient. Something that I think about too is how we share this resilience with the rest of the community, right? Especially with COVID-19. This is a moment where voices in the chronic illness, in the rare condition community, this is where we need to showcase these voices and really lead and be leaders in our community to make sure that we can, come out of COVID-19 stronger. Something too that I always think about is this crazy statistic: 1 out of 4 of 20-year-olds right now will get a disability by the time they're retired, by the retirement age. And that's something that, knowing that piece of knowledge, it is now the time to learn about our community, to really understand our community, and not only that, but be understanding and empathetic. I think everyone wins when we are able to showcase just how resilient our community is.
Mm-hmm. Yes, wonderful. And I can't believe it, but we're coming almost to a close. The time has flown by. So is there anything that you would say to someone listening who feels alone right now, maybe doesn't know where to reach out to find support? Any final thoughts from each of you? Maybe Roberta, start with you.
Mm-hmm. It is so hard. I remember the early years when things were, the sheer amount of appointments alone, were difficult to organize. The amount of medication that we had to give, that can be extremely isolating when you are so busy in rare disease that you can't take a step back and, deal with your own needs as well. And then you somewhere can lose yourself in that. And it's really tough. I think that sharing those with your doctor or even your child's doctor, that experience of feeling alone, is really important. And I think more than ever, we understand that rare disease affects an entire family and changes the family dynamic, not just for the individual that has it. And, I think being, again, vulnerable and open to those that you're dealing with in the rare disease world is extremely important. They are there to support you, and they're there to support your needs. And if you don't share it, no one can help and no one can step in. And that's, something that a lot of people just have to get to a point to be okay with that,
Yeah, thank you. Maria, what's your final advice for our viewers?
Exactly what Roberta said. Like, you have to first accept what you have, whatever you want to call it, however you whatever part of your diagnosis you want to tackle first, you have to first accept it. And then once you've done that, you're gonna get so much more comfortable asking for help. And once you start asking for help, you're gonna realize you're not the only one. You're not the only you're not alone in this journey. And I think that's the most rewarding piece of it for me has been to just meet the wonderful people that I've met, that I've gotten to learn from their experiences. I mean, however rare your condition is, there's great support. We're not only Global Genes, but you can also contact us. We put together ladies who have a very rare tumor called STT, and we put 3 ladies in touch because one of our babies just was inspired by them, and we talked about it, and it's always with our branding. So there is cases where you can look for support, but first you have to be comfortable and accept it.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Lisa, what are your thoughts?
I agree with everything that's already been said. And I think that asking for help is one of the hardest things in the world to do. And, when especially when you have a new diagnosis and you're trying to figure things out for yourself and for your family, it's really hard to ask someone to help you. Mm-hmm. And I think it's also hard when someone says, "What can I do to help?" to even know how to answer that. It's really, really challenging because you have so much going on and you don't even know what would be helpful. You don't want to burden somebody. And I think it's important to recognize that those people that reach out to you in your community that say that, they really mean it. They don't know what to do and they want to help you. And maybe it's, can we just get together for coffee and talk? Maybe that's a good way to start in terms of that very local community. But there are, your friends, your family, churches, organizations, schools. There's so many different places where support comes from. And I think, when you connect with an organization, it's even bigger. There's so much support offered. I know at the TS Alliance, we offer to connect, like what Maria was just saying, we offer to connect people who have similar experiences. And if someone calls and says, I really want to talk to another grandmother who's going through this, we find another grandmother with similar scenarios for their grandchild so that they can talk to one another and have that support network. But I think it's really important to be open and to allow yourself to be vulnerable and to say, this is hard. And I just, sometimes, you do need help. And the more those communication lines open, the more easy it becomes to actually say, what I could really use is this. But I think it's really important to know that we're not alone in this, as much as it may feel like nobody else understands or goes through it. And they may not, but it doesn't mean that they're not there for you. And in whatever capacity that means and whatever your networks are, I think it's really important to just always recognize that there is help out there.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. That's wonderful advice. And can I ask my helpers behind the scenes, did I miss any questions in the chat? And while we're looking at that, I just encourage anyone to chat in any remaining questions. We've got some time right now. While we're doing that, Roberta, there was a specific question to you that I know you answered, some interest in your survey. So could you talk a little bit about the specifics around your surveys? Others may want to do the same thing.
Absolutely. Coming from organizational leadership, it's important that we offer these kind of tools, like the Measuring What Matters survey. As a parent, it's important that we be included in these and do them when they're there, or even ask for them. the community has the power to ask what they need from an organization. And so don't ever be scared if you think that's something that could be useful. When you see your friends in the community, when things aren't answered, don't be scared to ask for that. The Measuring What Matters survey it's about a 53 question survey. It's very long. We put a disclaimer on there. It's long. you might have to sit down and take some time, but we offered up that it would lead our roundtable. We gave, what it's going to lead to, and the feedback that we got and the amount of individuals that took the survey was unbelievable. And again, we asked questions about financial situation and disease-related involvement, organ involvement, daily stressors, financial, job loss. Do you have financial backing or support? Do you have family that you support? Do you have other independents as well? Dependents that you're taking care of. Do you feel like you are struggling to hold down your job and deal with this as well? What is on the other side of what you're doing, making things difficult? We really wanted to get to the heart of how we can help our families and what matters to them most. And I'd be happy, anyone can email me, Roberta at Allergial.org. I'd be happy to, help you build a survey out or show you what ours was at any time.
Great. And we've got a thank you, Roberta. One more question, and this is really interesting. How do you connect your groups when they feel uncomfortable someone may feel uncomfortable about privacy, just not comfortable being on camera? How do you handle that in your groups? Maybe Lisa, do you want to take a stab?
Yeah, so I think on the Zoom calls, for one, to start with, you have the option not to share your camera. So that's always in your control not to do that. And if we do have people that are concerned about privacy, and so we recognize that not everybody wants to be very public on Facebook or other forums. There are people who, maybe read what's there but don't connect. And we also have another platform that we use for more private conversations, another social media platform that we'll use for more private conversations so that you can not be so public and you don't use your name, you use whatever you want to call it, refer to yourself in that group. And I think that's really beneficial. And then a lot of the non-organizational groups that people are involved in are private groups that they control. And so you might be public within that one group, like TSC Mommies I mentioned, you'd be public within that one group, but you wouldn't, your posts wouldn't be there for your bosses or colleagues or other people to see. And so, that's some of what we've tried to do to recognize privacy. And we're always available for individual conversations. We have a phone line that we are more than welcome to have people call and talk with us. We have an educational expert. We have a community team. We are definitely there and can put people in touch with one-on-one conversations or can field those questions in a more private setting as well.
Oh, wonderful. That's so important. So I think we're going to wrap up, and I want to just warmly thank Roberta, Lisa, and Maria for leading such a great discussion. Thanks so much to folks calling in and listening to this session for your questions. Really helped make a very rich discussion. And please join us next. Up next is operationalizing patient inclusivity and maintaining compliance. So I'll say goodbye to everyone and sign off and wish everyone a continued great conference. Thanks, everyone. Thanks to the panel. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.